This video is narrated. If you prefer the video with subtitles only, please click on the link in the description box below. July 31, 1973. Over New Hampshire. Delta Airlines Flight 723 is flying from Manchester, New Hampshire to Boston, Massachusetts. The flight had originated in Burlington. In command is Captain John Strail, age 49. He has 14,800 hours of flying time. The co-pilot is First Officer Sidney Burrell, age 31. He has 7,000 hours of flying time. Also on board is trainee pilot Joseph Burrell, age 52. There are 83 passengers and 6 crew members. The plane is a 5-year-old Dalo Douglas DC-931. At 10:51 a.m., Boston Approach Control clears the pilots to the Lawrence, Massachusetts VOR. The controller states, no delays, plan vectors ILS 4 right. The Boston altimeter is 3011. Weather is partial obstruction, estimated 400 overcast, mile and a half in fog. The pilots acknowledge the clearance and climbs to an assigned altitude of 4,000 feet. During the climb, trainee pilot Burrell conducts the after takeoff checklist with the captain. The pilot's radio, Delta 723 approaching Lawrence. The controller responds, 723, roger, fly heading 180 now. Radar vectors ILS 4 right. The pilots acknowledge the instruction. At 10:55 a.m., trainee pilot Burrell begins the descent checklist. Half a minute later, Flight 723 is cleared to descend to 3,000 feet. The pilots comply with the instruction. Trainee pilot Burrell conducts the approach checklist with the captain. The controller radios, Delta 723, fly a heading of 080 now. Intercept the localizer course and fly it inbound, over. The pilots respond, OK, 080 for intercept. Captain Strail states, localizer is alive. First Officer Burrell responds, go down to 2,000 now, can't we? Captain Strail replies, he didn't say to go down. Captain Strail radios, is 723 cleared for ILS? The controller replies, yes, 723 is cleared for the ILS, yes. First Officer Burrell calls for the checklist. Trainee pilot Burrell replies, 3 green, pressure and quantity. The trainee pilot then states, before landing is complete. Captain Strail states, get it on, Joe. Sit. First Officer Burrell responds, getting down 1,000 feet a minute. Captain Strail replies, leave it below 1. First Officer Burrell then states, this command bar shows. Captain Strail responds with, yeah, that doesn't show much. The controller radios, 723 is cleared to land, tower 119.1. The captain replies, 723. The captain then states, going Laika, then curses. The captain then says, okay, your localizer is starting to come back in now. First Officer Burrell responds, okay. The first officer then states, set my power up for me if I want it. Captain Strail replies, okay, just fly the airplane. The captain then says, you better go raw data, I don't trust that thing. Captain's trail radios, Boston Tower, Delta 723, final. The controller replies, clear to land, 4 right, traffic's clearing at the end. The RVR shows more than 6,000. A fog bank is moving in. It's pretty heavy across the approach end. The pilots acknowledge the clearance. Captain's trail states, let's get back on course. First Officer Burrell responds, I just gotta get this back. Delta Airlines Flight 723 crashes 3,000 feet short of runway 4 right at Logan International Airport. Everyone on board is killed. 2 passengers initially survived. However, both succumbed to their injuries. As Flight 723 was proceeding inbound towards the localizer course at 3,000 feet, the Boston approach controller's attention was drawn to an aircraft handed to him by Boston Airway Traffic Control Center. This aircraft was in potential conflict with another aircraft at the same altitude. At the time the approach controller should have been clearing Flight 723, as required by regulations, he was trying to resolve the potential conflict and to avoid a possible mid-air collision. Consequently, an approach clearance was not given to Flight 723 until the pilots requested it. Subsequent communication problems with one of the aircraft involved in the potential traffic conflict further occupied the Boston approach controller and delayed Flight 723's release to the Boston Tower. The aircraft's airspeed at the outer marker was about 206 knots. This was 46 knots above the maximum speed recommended by company procedures. It was also 63 knots above the minimum speed computed for the aircraft's gross weight of 87,800 pounds. During most of the approach inbound to the outer marker, the airspeed was maintained well over the computed VS+5 speed, or about 123 knots. The faster than normal airspeed during the approach, together with the delay in initiating the descent, resulted in 2 other problems for the pilots. First, it increased the difficulty they had in capturing and maintaining the glide slope. The aircraft passed over the outer marker at an altitude more than 200 feet above the glide slope. At normal approach speed, the aircraft could have easily reached the glide slope altitude by increasing the descent rate slightly. However, at the faster than normal airspeed, a rate of descent of more than 1,300 feet per minute would have been required to intercept the glide slope before reaching decision height. If the pilots attempted to capture the glide slope at such a rate of descent, then they would have had difficulty reducing to an acceptable approach speed. Second, the faster than normal approach would have required the pilots to act quickly than usual. Another factor in an approach initiated high and fast concerns the use of the flight directors. In normal use, the VOR localizer mode of the flight director would be selected. Operation in the VOR localizer mode requires following the roll command bar to maintain the heading necessary to intercept and capture the localizer. Sensing the localizer signals, the command bar will command the lateral maneuvers necessary for localizer intercept and final approach guidance. Concurrently, the system arms to capture the glide slope. After the glide slope is captured, pitch command information is displayed as a function of glide slope deviation. However, the system is designed so an aircraft operating in the VOR localizer mode must be on or below the glide slope at the time the localizer is intercepting in order to capture the glide slope. If the aircraft is too high and the glide slope is not captured, the pilot will not have flight director pitch guidance for the initial approach. However, the flight director can conduct an intercept above the glide slope if the approach mode is selected. Selection of the approach mode presents a fly-down command which would force the capture of the glide slope. The flight path of Flight 723 indicated that the aircraft was above the glide slope when it intercepted the localizer. As a result, if the flight director system had been in VOR localizer mode, it would not have captured the glide slope signals. Nor would it have displayed pitch command information. During simulation of the localizer interception, it was necessary to switch to the approach mode to obtain pitch command information on the flight director. The flight path indicated that Flight 723 flew an asymptomatic approach to the localizer centerline. This was followed by continuous deviation in the aircraft left of the centerline. Thereafter, the flight path and crew conversations indicated that the pilots were experiencing problems in attempting to maintain the lateral position on the localizer centerline. The first deviation from the localizer course started immediately after the captain stated, "Get on it, Joe. Sit." At that time, the aircraft was at 1,600 feet and still above the glide slope with an excessive airspeed. The NTSB believes that this comment was in reference to the aircraft's position above the glide slope and that it prompted a change from VOR localizer to approach mode in order to obtain pitch guidance information. The subsequent lateral steering problems, however, would have been understandable only if the flight director had been inadvertently placed in the go-around GA mode at the time. In the go-around mode, localizer signals are removed from the flight director system and roll steering command functions only to keep the wings level. During simulator tests, investigators found that it was possible to unintentionally select the go-around mode while rotating the mode selector switch to the approach mode. A slight overshoot of the approach position detent caused the flight director to display cues associated with go-around mode. Due to the absence of a mode annunciator panel to indicate otherwise, the pilots would expect the system to react in the approach mode. In actuality, the system would be reacting to a go-around situation, and localizer guidance would no longer be presented. Despite insufficient evidence as to the underlying cause, it was apparent that the pilots were aware of the abnormal display on the flight director. At 11:07 a.m., 21 seconds after the captain stated, "Get on it," the first officer responded with, "This command bar shows." The captain then responded with, "Yeah, that doesn't show much." A few seconds later, the captain stated, "You better go to raw data. I don't trust that thing." At this point, the aircraft was well to the left of the centerline and still high on the glide slope and passing through 400 feet. Because conditions were unstable, it should have been obvious to the pilots that, in order to continue the approach, radical heading and pitch corrections would be required to attain the proper glide path. The flight data recorder indicated continual heading changes from the time the captain made the raw data comment to impact. Because the pilots did not consider a missed approach, they may have expected to break out of the weather at an altitude that would have provided a safe maneuvering margin. Despite the pilots being preoccupied with the attempted lateral corrections to the centerline, they should have conducted altitude monitoring and call-out procedures. Because of the pilots' experience with weather in the Boston area, their concern during the approach should have been to monitor their altitude. The before landing checklist calls for the pilot non-flying to monitor the approach and call out 200 above, 100 above, and minimum as the aircraft reached decision height. These callouts were never made, nor were there any reference made to altitude after the aircraft flew past the outer marker. The NTSB blames the pilots for failing to monitor altitude and failure to recognize the aircraft's descent below the decision height during an unstabilized approach.